under the dark skies of the Pacific, North Korea suddenly launched a barrage of Hwasong ballistic missiles and high-speed rocket artillery toward a U.S. destroyer. The Aegis system immediately fired SM-6 interceptors, while F-35C fighters from the USS Gerald R. Ford carriers surged into the air, releasing precision-guided JDAM bombs onto coastal launch sites. Overhead, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft crippled North Korean radar, while from afar, B-1B bombers unleashed Jason cruise missiles to pierce deep into fortified bases. But this was only the beginning. Behind it lay a retaliatory plan that could change the balance of the entire region. At 07:22 a.m. on June 15, 2025, the waters of the East Sea lay calm under a pale morning light. Fishing boats dotted the horizon, gulls circled lazily above, and there was no hint of the chaos about to unfold. Out beyond the horizon, hidden in the haze, a North Korean Kwangmyongsong-class reconnaissance satellite had been quietly feeding targeting coordinates to coastal missile batteries for the past 48 hours. Every calculation, every correction had been made with chilling precision. Aboard the American destroyer USS John Finn, part of a routine joint patrol with the South Korean Navy, 312 sailors went about their duties, unaware that they were being watched. The ship's SY-1D radar swept the skies in steady arcs, catching nothing unusual. On the surface, the ocean remained deceptively serene. But inside a heavily fortified bunker near Wonsan, the order had already been given. 5 Hwasong-12 intermediate-range ballistic missiles and 6 KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles were primed for launch, their warheads loaded with high-explosive payloads designed to disable or sink a warship with a single strike. The countdown had begun. 10, 9, 8. A sudden roar split the stillness as the missile hatches yawned open. Plumes of fire and smoke erupted. And within seconds, the missiles were streaking into the sky, white contrails clawing upward, piercing the clouds before arcing toward their prey. For the crew of the USS John Finn, the first warning came as a shrill, urgent tone in the Combat Information Center. Multiple inbound tracks detected. Bearing 270. Speed, Mach 6. The officer of the deck's voice tightened. This is not a drill. For weeks before June 15, 2025, intelligence satellites from both the United States and South Korea had detected unusual movement along North Korea's eastern coastline. Convoys of military trucks traveled under the cover of darkness, unloading equipment into fortified coastal positions. Communication intercepts picked up an increase in encrypted traffic between Pyongyang's Central Command and multiple coastal defense regiments. Yet, the true scale of the operation was hidden. The Hwasong-12 launchers had been concealed in camouflaged shelters carved into cliff faces overlooking the East Sea. The KN-23 systems, mounted on mobile transporter erector launchers, had been dispersed across forested areas near Wonsan and Hamhung, their positions shifting daily to evade detection. North Korea's intent was clear to those who could read the signs. This wasn't a deterrent display. This was preparation for a first strike. The chosen target, the USS John Finn, was no random pick. It symbolized America's unwavering commitment to the defense of South Korea, a constant thorn in Pyongyang's strategic calculus. Meanwhile, the U.S. 7th Fleet had been rotating its presence in the region, balancing deterrence patrols with freedom of navigation operations in contested waters. The USS John Finn was scheduled for a routine joint exercise with South Korean destroyers ROKS Sejong the Great and ROKUS Munmu the Great. Together, they formed a surface action group capable of projecting power deep into the East Sea. But in the war rooms of Pyongyang, planners believed they had found a fleeting window of opportunity. The U.S. Carrier Strike Group, centered around the USS Ronald Reagan, was operating more than 300 nautical miles away, too far to intervene quickly. The destroyers on patrol lacked immediate carrier-based air support. If a crippling blow could be dealt now, it would send shockwaves through the entire region. And so, with the click of a single encrypted switch, North Korea's coastal missile network moved from silent watch to full combat readiness. The next move would plunge the East Sea into fire. At 07:38 a.m., the USS John Finn's radar operators picked up faint returns from the north, just enough to trigger a routine check, but not enough to raise alarms. The blips vanished within seconds, likely masked by advanced radar-evading maneuvers or ground clutter from the mountainous coastline. Aboard the ship, the crew continued their morning routines. The mess hall bustled with sailors grabbing quick breakfasts. Engineers in the engine room monitored gauges, unaware that the temperature of the situation outside was already rising to a boil. Hundreds of miles away in Yokosuka, Japan, the 7th Fleet's Operations Center was monitoring the same airspace. A junior analyst noticed irregular data patterns coming from satellite feeds over the East Sea. "Possible missile prep signatures," she reported. Her superior frowned, instructing her to keep watching, but not yet to sound an alert. It was a decision that would be regretted within minutes. At 7:41 a.m., North Korea launched. The first wave consisted of 3 Hwasong-12 missiles, their long, slender bodies slicing through the upper atmosphere. Almost immediately after, 6 KN-23 ballistic missiles erupted from forested positions, accelerating to hypersonic speeds. Their trajectories were staggered to overwhelm any missile defense system. The USS John Finn's Combat Information Center erupted in noise. Multiple inbound tracks confirmed. Bearing 275, range 90 nautical miles. Impact in less than 3 minutes. Set condition 1, all hands to battle stations. The ship's klaxon wailed as sailors dropped what they were doing and sprinted to their posts. The Aegis combat system came alive, automatically plotting interception solutions. But the North Korean attack was more than just missiles. Radar operators picked up additional fast-moving contacts, skimming just meters above the waves. Anti-ship cruise missiles, likely KH-35 variants locally produced under the name Kumsong-3, fired from concealed coastal batteries. The plan was brutally simple. Saturate the target from above and below, forcing its defenses to break under the pressure. In the Combat Information Center, the tension was palpable. Every second felt like a lifetime as the crew prepared to fight for their survival. They knew that once the missiles appeared on the horizon, they would have less than 30 seconds to stop them. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, a North Korean Gorai-class submarine silently prepared to add its own deadly message to the chaos above. At 7:24 a.m., the battle began. From the deck of the USS John Finn, the horizon suddenly lit up with streaks of light. The ship's vertical launch system roared as SM-3 interceptors shot skyward, twisting and accelerating to meet the incoming ballistic threats. The air was filled with a deafening mix of rocket thunder and alarm sirens. "Vampires inbound. Multiple," the radar operator shouted over the comms, his voice barely audible over the noise. The first SM-3 found its mark, detonating in a blinding flash as it intercepted a Hwasong-12 in mid-course. Shards of burning debris rained down into the sea, sending plumes of steam skyward. Seconds later, a second interceptor struck true, neutralizing another ballistic missile before it could descend. But the saturation tactic was working. The KN-23s, with their erratic quasi-ballistic trajectories, were harder to track and intercept. One slipped past the outer defensive ring. The USS John Finn's close-in weapon systems opened fire, their 20mm Vulcan cannons spewing thousands of rounds in a cone of tungsten. A fiery explosion blossomed just 600 meters from the ship, the shockwave rattling every bolt in her hull. Meanwhile, the low-flying Kumsong-3 cruise missiles were closing fast. The ship's ESSM, Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, leapt from their launchers, arcing low to chase the sea-skimming targets. 2 were destroyed in rapid succession, but 1 missile broke through, slamming into the port side just above the waterline. The impact tore open steel plating, flooding compartments and throwing sailors off their feet. Damage control teams raced into action as smoke poured from the gaping wound. The ship's captain, Commander Ryan Caldwell, gripped the railing on the bridge and barked orders without hesitation. "Hold your fire for the subsurface contact. They'll be coming next." He was right. Beneath the waves, the Goryeo-class submarine launched a single Pokoktsong-3 SLBM from periscope depth. It broke the surface in a column of spray and fire before vanishing into the clouds. Its trajectory was steep and fast, aimed not at the John Finn, but at the South Korean destroyer Rock Sejong the Great. The war had entered its first deadly heartbeat, and it was clear that North Korea was not just attacking a single ship. They were striking the alliance itself. At 7:47 a.m., the East Sea became a cauldron of fire. The first minutes of the battle had been chaotic, but now the fight surged into a deadly rhythm. The Rock Sejong the Great's Aegis system locked onto the incoming Pokoktsong-3. In the span of heartbeats, 2 SM-3 Block UA interceptors tore upward in twin columns of fire. At an altitude of over 150 kilometers, one found its mark, detonating in a silent, dazzling flash that scattered the missile into harmless fragments. The crew erupted in cheers, cut short by the next wave of threats. From the coastline near Honghong, 4 more Hwaslon 12s launched in perfect sequence, their trajectories staggered to confuse missile defenses. Almost simultaneously, a second Goryeo-class submarine, undetected until now, fired 2 Pokoktsong-4 missiles from deeper waters. The American and South Korean ships were now fighting on every axis, surface, air, and undersea, against a relentless tide. On the USS John Finn, damage control teams fought to contain flooding as the ship's port list increased. The bridge crew's voices were tight with urgency. "Missile impact in 54 seconds. We can't take another hit to port." Commander Caldwell made the call. "Shift all remaining interceptors to starboard defense. Divert CIWS coverage to Sector 3. The tactical display lit up as the ship's final SM-3s streaked toward the sky. One connected. The other missed, the missile continuing its deadly descent. Suddenly, from the southeast, a new roar filled the air. 4 F-35B Lightning IIs from the USS America's Air Wing, scrambled minutes earlier, dropped into the fight. Their radar signatures were minimal, their payloads deadly. Each aircraft released a pair of AIM-120D AMRAAMs and AGM-158C LORASM anti-ship missiles, targeting both airborne threats and the coastal batteries still firing. The LORASMs slammed into their targets with surgical precision, erupting in walls of flame and dust along the North Korean shoreline. Secondary explosions confirmed the destruction of at least 2 missile launch sites, but victory was far from certain. 1 KN-23 missile slipped past the defensive screen, striking the aft section of the Rock's Munu the Great. A deafening blast tore through her helicopter deck, igniting aviation fuel and sending a towering column of black smoke into the sky. For a brief moment, the battle seemed to teeter on the edge of disaster. But the alliance refused to break. With each passing second, their counterattack grew more coordinated, more punishing. And in Pyongyang's command bunker, the reality began to set in. They had unleashed a storm, but it was a storm that might yet turn back upon them. By UA02 AM, the roar of battle began to fade, replaced by the hiss of seawater against smoldering steel. The East Sea, moments ago a maelstrom of fire and fury, now lay under a veil of drifting smoke. The USS John Finn, though wounded, remained afloat. Damage control parties had stopped the flooding, and the ship's power systems were holding. Across the formation, Rock Sejong the Great maintained her combat posture, her radar arrays still sweeping the skies for any final threats. Rock's Moonmu the Great, though heavily damaged, had contained her fires and was being escorted out of the engagement zone by a South Korean frigate. Above, the 4 F-35Bs circled like silent predators, ensuring no new threat could approach. The few surviving North Korean missile batteries along the coast were either destroyed or silenced, their crews likely evacuating under the threat of retaliatory strikes. In the operations center at Yokosuka, the 7th Fleet commander gave the order: hold the line, maintain presence, and prepare for follow-on operations. Across secure channels, Allied commanders exchanged short, firm acknowledgments. This was not over. For Pyongyang, the battle had been meant as a show of force, a hammer blow to fracture the alliance. Instead, it had revealed the alliance's resilience and resolve. North Korea had drawn blood, but they had also awoken a response they could not easily contain. As the morning sun broke through the haze, its light reflected off the battered hulls of the Allied ships. The message was clear: they had survived the storm. And now, the choice of the next move belonged to them. Somewhere in the deep waters to the north, sonar operators picked up the faint echo of a retreating submarine. The fight had ended here for now, but the East Sea was far from quiet. The next strike, whether by missile or torpedo, could come without warning. For the sailors aboard the USS John Finn and her allies, one thought united them as they scanned the horizon: this was only the beginning. If it were you, what do you think truly prevented an all-out war from erupting after this confrontation? Was it the deterrence of US military power, or the strategic limits that North Korea dared not cross? Share your thoughts in the comments below.